Will democracy survive in the next couple of years?
And essentially, we are the same.
And there are so many needs that Minnesota has.
What people are saying they need right now.
Access to democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Thomson Reuters, the Answer Company. Crutchfield Dermatology, a full-service treatment center in Medi-Spa in Eagan. Their goal is to help you look good and feel great with beautiful skin. With service built around courtesy, dignity, and respect, Mayo-trained Dr. Charles Crutchfield personally treats each patient and is acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians. Firefly Credit Union, with locations throughout the Twin Cities, has proudly served Minnesotans since 1925. Firefly guides its members forward by delivering customized financial solutions to improve their lives in all aspects of banking. Firefly Credit Union, they light the way with life illuminated. Edina Eye, Physicians and Surgeons, a division of Twin Cities Eye Consultants, has proudly served the Twin Cities for more than 55 years. Now in 7 convenient locations. Using the most advanced technology combined with human touch, Edina Eye offers comprehensive services but dedicated specialists committed to excellence with innovative procedures and expertise for the most advanced eye care.
Welcome once again to Access to Democracy, a first-time guest promising to be a very interesting guest. And he comes from quite a distance away from here. From Israel, a transplanted Israeli, Ilan Sinelnikov, and I think I pronounced it correctly.
That's right. Thank you.
Who is the president and founder of an organization that's become very prominent on college campuses called Students Supporting Israel. So Ilan, why don't you give us a little bit of information about you, your background, and the history of how this organization started?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me here on the show today. About myself, I'm Ilan from Israel, originally born and raised in Rehovot, Israel, to a family that immigrated to Israel from the former Soviet Union. First generation in my family to be born in the country. I was growing up there, and then later on in 2008, when I was in high school, we had a relocation. My dad got a job offer in the United States, so the family relocated to Minnesota. Out of all places, I promise I didn't even think I knew where Minnesota is before we came here. So it was very new to me. Of course, the weather was a big difference in the weather and the climate, relocating from Israel to Minneapolis. But over here, I already finished my high school. I attended Wayzata High School, which is a local high school here in the west suburbs. I got accepted to the University of Minnesota, where I studied business and marketing in my undergrad, and also where I started the organization Students Supporting Israel. Now, Students Supporting Israel was originally started in March of 2012, so a little over 8 years ago, when I was a freshman student at the University of Minnesota. And I want you to walk back with me to realize why we started the organization. Because as I was a freshman student, our entire campus back in 2012 was filled with different flyers that's talking about Israeli apartheid, so to speak, or events that call for the boycott of Israel, what we know nowadays as the BDS movement.
The BDS movement, which
Exactly.
is still prevalent in a lot of places.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, what you didn't mention is there has been a lot of anti-Semitism on college campuses, including here. And
Indeed, I faced some anti-Semitism myself as I was a senior at the University of Minnesota, and I'll be happy to touch on that as well. But as we saw all of those different things happening, and we asked ourselves, so where is our side? Where is the pro-Israel side on this campus? Like, where are the students that represent and fight for Israel, and not just having an Israeli flag in their living room or attending a service on a high holiday, but taking the campus grounds, representing the Jewish state? And when we saw that there isn't such a thing, we realized right away that the best way to counter all the anti-Israel narrative and the boycott narrative and the anti-Semitism. It's to establish a student club at the University of Minnesota that is run by the students, that is led by the students, and a club that had 3 goals in mind. The first goal, we could not just be a Jewish organization. We are well aware of the fact that the majority of the college students on campuses are not Jewish. So we needed to preach outside the choir. We could not just preach to the choir, convincing our own people why it's important to support Israel. Then the second thing that was very important for us was to be visible. You know, as I mentioned, too many times we see the anti-Israel people out there on the campus grounds protesting, demonstrating, and then when it comes down to the Israel side, people are asking, where are they? So it was important for us to be visible, to show that there is 2 sides to the story. Because if I'm a student that's walking on campus and all I see is one picture day after day after day, I will fall for that narrative eventually. And the last thing that was very important for us is to be proactive, to initiate. Because we all know, especially Israelis know, that the best defense is offense. And what do I mean by that? It's not wait until something is bad happening to the Jewish community or an anti-Israel event is taking place and then publish a statement about it or just say, oh my God, how bad it is. But to initiate, to be active throughout the entire academic year, to work on campus, to be involved in student government, to propose pro-Israel legislation, to put up events with other coalition and other student clubs, and to be a visible, strong, proactive club that is open here for any student, Jews and non-Jews alike, that want to support Israel. And as we grew at the University of Minnesota, 8 years later, we operate all over the world. And this is
And
in a very short
we're going to talk about that and your expansion. What Ilan didn't mention is that he also is active as a soccer coach here locally, bringing that bizarre sport to Minnesota. But in addition to that, he was recently selected as one of the top 50 Zionist influencers in the United States. And in fact, he was invited to the White House, where they recently signed an agreement between Israel, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain, normalizing relationships. And we'll talk about that a little bit, because I suspect he is much more a Zionist than I am. And I think we'll talk about our political differences.
It's not a competition to be a Zionist.
But you know, I spent Operation Desert Storm as a volunteer in Israel. So it's not as though I don't have really deep ties with the state. I do. I don't have deep ties with the political aspect of the state, but then I don't have deep ties with the political aspect of the United States at the present time either. So anyway, you have spread from, in 8 years, you have spread from one unit here at the University of Minnesota to how many campuses?
So up until today, we operated on over 120 college campuses in the United States, in Canada, and recently, as in the past 4 months, with our expansion to Mexico and Argentina, where there are some Jewish communities that and students that reached out to us and also want to be involved in part of students supporting Israel.
So you've been very busy.
It's
Certainly
been a bit summer.
college campuses. Yeah, I know there's a unit, an SSI unit at Syracuse, which is my background, Syracuse and Syracuse Law School. But how does your organization differ from, say, Hillel or other Jewish organizations that exist on college campuses?
Well, first of all, our organization, you know, we work with, we're like the United Nations of the Israel and Jewish orgs on campus. We work with any Jewish or Zionist organization, and we're happy to do so. How we're different is the fact that Students Supporting Israel is not a Jewish club. So approximately 35% of our members across North America are non-Jewish students. If you go to places like Georgia, if you go to places like California, you'll find many students who are not Jewish and are involved in the club for their own reasons and their own backgrounds. Now, another thing in how we are different than many other organizations is that we are the only organization that started by students and until today is operating and run by students. So SSI started as a little student club at the University of Minnesota and kept spreading to the Midwest, then to the coast, then to Canada, and to many other places. So on the different campuses you go, you can find a registered student club that is an organic, authentic part of the university community under the name Students Supporting Israel. And this is us.
And you are the founder and the president of SSI International. So,
Correct.
as I said, you probably have done a lot of traveling. Now, how has the pandemic affected your, really your travel and your actions to bring more campuses into the organization?
So in a variety of ways, pandemic, of course, was a big challenge for us. But, I tend to think that in every challenge or any challenging times, we need to find the different opportunities in within. So the challenges, of course, were the fact that the last event that Students Supporting Israel hosted on the ground was in March of 2019. So we are talking almost 6 months without actual physical activity on the campuses. And it's a very big problem because at the end of the day, as a grassroots organization, the activism on the ground, this is our bread and butter of the organization. Now, with that being said, just like many other nonprofits and organizations, we needed to adjust to the times, move a lot of our activism and advocacy online, let it be by different webinars and calls, let it be by different op-eds that our students been submitting to schools and newspapers. And we needed to adjust. And the biggest part was when we expanded to South America, when during the pandemic, as students researched different webinars and speakers, a few Jewish students from Buenos Aires, Argentina, reached out to us, asking us to do a webinar for them and talk about different challenges that students in North America face. And that was the moment that we realized that, hold on, but you guys don't have any Israel clubs in your universities, and you do have student life and student clubs there. So how come let's bring SSI to your campus in Buenos Aires? And that's how we expanded. And of course, it was a big thing for us, and we're happy to work now with students all over the world.
Now, our viewing audience, is mostly an adult audience, but that adult audience has a lot of students in various colleges. So how can they get in touch with you? And let's talk about that so we can at least bring the opportunity to have some more people contact you.
Mm-hmm. So it's important for us that everyone feels like they're a part of Students Supporting Israel. And it doesn't matter what age they are or what location they live in. So, of course, in the student community, students are well aware of the organization. They know about us. They see us on social media. For the older community that is not on college campuses right now, they can first of all check out our website, ssimovement.org. Then they can also follow us on different social media platforms that they might be on. Let it be Facebook, let it be our YouTube channel that has a lot of videos and lectures from our events and activities. And they can always message our website in order to see how they can volunteer or get involved. But any help and support is greatly appreciated.
That's ssimovement.org.
Correct.
Okay. By the way, that picture over my shoulder is by David Najar. Do you know David Najar?
No, I'm not aware. I feel like I should know the name though.
He is a up-and-coming Israeli artist who actually mentored or really was a student of the late Yitzhak. I'm trying to think of a name and I just blew a name, but that's not unusual. In any event, Najar was a member of the Israeli army, and he is an instructor still with that technique that is being utilized by armies all over the world. I can't think of the name of it.
Krav Maga?
Pardon?
Krav Maga?
It's right. A self-defense mechanism, but it's also an aggressive, when needed, a mechanism. And it's interesting. He's a very interesting and intriguing guy who we met actually about 4 years ago, and we have a couple of his paintings. And I just thought I'd throw that in to get a little Israeli flavor into a little more Israeli flavor into the discussion. Now, tell people, what is Zionism? Because I consider myself a Zionist, but I don't consider myself in tune, as I said, with the politics of Israel at the moment. So how do you differentiate, and what is Zionism to you?
Of course. So, and this is, by the way, a question that is being discussed on college campuses all the time. And the biggest problem that we see in a society that many students don't know what Zionism is truly about. And it's important everyone understands and knows that Zionism, it's the movement for the liberation of the Jewish people. It's the liberation movement of the Jewish people in order to establish a national homeland. This is what the whole idea of Zionism is all about. And you don't need to be left on the political map, or you don't need to be right on the political map, because as we study modern day Zionism, even in Israeli schools, we know that the fathers of Zionism were not on the right political map. There were many socialist Zionism, there were religious Zionists, there were reservist Zionists. So there were many different people who realized that there is a problem, and the Jewish people are facing problem around the world. And the problem is anti-Semitism and the fact that the Jewish people are not masters from their own destiny. Therefore, the Jewish people created the Zionist movement with, of course, Herzl, the visionary that went to the Dreyfus Affairs in France and saw how anti-Semitism affected Jewish people. And the Zionistic movement helped us, the Jewish people, to finally, to my opinion, you ask me personally what it means to me, to finally not be homeless in the world and have our own home, let it be if we live there at the moment or not, but a place where the Jewish people will always be safe and always be protected and will always be masters to their own destiny. This is what Zionism is for me.
And it is to a large degree for me, having lived through World War II. Fortunately, none of my family members were particularly affected. I had uncles in the service. I had a father who tried to volunteer for every service and got turned down because of really bad eyesight by everyone, who was very active locally as an airplane spotter and things like that. But Zionism to me is ensuring that the Israelis have a home, that the Jewish people have a home, that really what they are doing is occupying land that they occupied 5,000 years ago. And it's only since really President Truman and the end of World War II that this land has been ensured. Now, do I agree with a lot of the politics of the country? No, I think that the Palestinians are entitled to their own country. I think that Israel should not have expanded its boundaries beyond the 67 war boundaries, etc. But the fact of the matter is, I will and did make myself available when the call went out, because it's very important to me that we, as you described, have a homeland. Now, right now, Israel is in chaos, political chaos, because of Netanyahu being up on charges, much similar to President Trump, but also because of the COVID-19. Now, they just imposed because they had, I think, 7,000 cases in Israel yesterday.
8,000 today.
8,000 today. It's really running rampant. I blame a lot of that on the Hasidic community, which refuses to wear masks or socially distance. And it really comes back to haunt them. But the fact of the matter is that the country has imposed a lockdown, a very severe lockdown, which, had we done that in this country, would have resulted, in my estimation, in many more than the 203,000 deaths we had as of yesterday. Just an alarming number. So anyway, that's a little of my perspective on top of your perspective. Now, we've talked about Zionism. We know that anti-Semitism has been around for eons. But tell us about the BDS movement, which is a very inappropriate movement in my estimation, but one which caught fire on college campuses.
Of course, and before I go to BDS, it's important for me to mention that, there is a generation that was born prior to the birth of the state of Israel, and they know what a world without Israel looked like. And nowadays, today, the younger generation on college campuses is born into a world in which Israel is such a strong and powerful country. And that's why some of those bridges are being kind of splitting and going farther apart. And our job as Zionist people, again, doesn't matter whatever our political affiliation is, it's to connect those generations to make sure that we all understand the importance of the state of Israel for the Jewish people. Now, in regards to the BDS movement, so the BDS movement was, ironically enough, started in Israel. The founder of the BDS movement was a professor at Tel Aviv University, Omar Barghouti, and he started a movement that tries to boycott and divest and put sanctions on Israel. But this movement has a very, very problematic and ties and very, very problematic roots, because many of the founders and leaders of the BDS movement openly call for the elimination of the state of Israel, for the destruction of the state of Israel, and for almost a one-state solution, which is in our case for sure not a Jewish state. So the BDS movement was spreading on college campuses because there is a lot of misinformation and misguidance going around college campuses nowadays. And it's very easy to fall into a story that might sound very romantic or might sound very inspiring as people here try to fight and for the justice all over the world. But again, the BDS movement is an anti-Semitic movement, and I want to talk about it in my own personal experience. During my senior year, I was offered a position at the University of Minnesota Student Services Fee Committees. I applied for the position, I went through an interview process, I got a job, and then there was a vote in order to approve my position. And in front of the entire student government with 20 candidates on the slate, I was the only person that was asked for 1 hour questions about my own background, about my support to the state of Israel, and about my involvement in Jewish life, just because I was the founder of Students Supporting Israel. And the student government, they ended up voting against me. Out of 20 people, I was standing almost like on a trial, trying to defend my background and my own very personal identity. And the people who pushed the vote against me were members of BDS. So it was uncomfortable, and I hope that no other Jewish students will ever face this experience. Unfortunately, this is not the case, and we're still dealing with a lot of it on college campuses today. That's why we have SSI.
And the BDS really, in addition to wanting to stop any actual business or transactions with Israel, wanted to boycott Israel, wanted to stop corporations from dealing with Israel. And yet, really, the IT progress of the world is not only on the west coast of the United States, but Israel itself. And some of the, certainly, organizations like the CIA and other defense organizations rely tremendously on our relationship with Israel and the fact that they are so far ahead of us in some degrees in terms of security that that is one of the reasons that I think you have been able to prosper in terms of growing campuses. Now, there was a vote, I think 2 days ago, in Columbia University, which is a hotbed of liberalism and certainly had a tremendous BDS population support. How did that vote go?
So actually, there were 3 votes in the past week. The first one was at Arizona State University, where our students pushed for the adoption of the IHRA definition, the IHRA, the International Holocaust Remembrance Organization, and that vote has passed. And Jewish students in Arizona and pro-Israel students in Arizona State right now are protected by the university. The second vote happened 2 days ago, as you mentioned, at Urbana-Champaign in Illinois. And actually in Urbana-Champaign, the student government voted for BDS, as the BDS resolution was brought to the table together with the Black Lives Matter movement and the BDS and a few other causes that are far apart from one another, but they mixed it all up in order to attack the Jewish community and the state of Israel in Urbana-Champaign. Our solution there is going to be to take over student government by running and being elected to those positions. And at Columbia University, as you mentioned, 2 days ago, a referendum started on campus in one of the Columbia colleges. and it actually ends today on the 29th of September at 10 a.m. We will find out the results. So students are still voting as we speak, and this is a referendum to support BDS or not. And I know that our students were working day and night on that campus to make sure that we collect enough votes and show that BDS has no home at Columbia University, because BDS is not progressive. BDS is far, far from it.
Well, BDS rises much like anti-Semitism out of ignorance and out of really prejudicial statements and really things that try to get people not to think, but to react without full knowledge. And it's a shame, but we have been enduring this literally for 5,781 years, and which will culminate actually this Sunday night with Yom Kippur, the holiest of holy days, a week in which we have really agonized over the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who I describe as a tiny giant and a woman who made such an impact on this state, on this country, that it's beyond description. In any event, so your work is cut out for you. And are you traveling or are you doing it mostly online at the moment?
So most of our activity is online at the moment. Of course, as I mentioned, our students are writing op-eds to different student journals and newspapers and blogs online. We're hosting many webinars that many of them can be found on our YouTube channel. If you'll go to Students Supporting Israel, you can find many webinars with different experts on different topics when it comes down to the Israel Middle East issues. So our students are working. The work never stops. And I'll tell you even more that right now, as we approach the new Jewish year, our work, every Jewish generation has their own challenges. But my generation's challenge is nothing in comparison of the previous Jewish generation challenges when the state of Israel wasn't born or when the state of Israel needed to fight for survival. So we are the most fortunate, luckiest Jewish generation to be around for thousands of years, and it is now our turn to protect and defend the Jewish state and the Jewish people.
Well said. And for anybody who is watching us, I suggest that when we can travel again, you should put Israel on your list of vacation locations, because it becomes far more than a vacation. When you understand, when you can be at Christ's tomb and at the Western Wall the same day, when you can be watching people getting baptized in the river, when you can spend time at a kibbutz, as I did at Kfar Blum, on the really far northern border, when you can be on the Golan Heights and look down on Syria, and when you drink some of the history of the country, you can't but come away really feeling fulfilled and much more really intelligent in terms of the country, the people, and if they could only drive a little slower, that's all I can say. They are crazy, crazy drivers. Ilan, I want to really thank you. I hope we'll have you back again and hear some success stories. It's been a real pleasure, and certainly stay well, stay safe, and stay the fight.
Thank you very much, and Gmar Chatima Tova to everyone. Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.
Bye-bye.